Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into tonight's tale of the shape of magic, I'd love to know where in the world you're watching from tonight. And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical, seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. If you listen closely enough, Ooo hums. Not in a way that's loud or obvious, not a song or a voice, but something gentler, older, like the faint vibration you might feel when you press your ear to the earth. It's the hum that lives underneath everything, the quiet rhythm that carries through the soil, the clouds, and even the stars that hang above the Candy Kingdom. It isn't spoken about often, but it's always there, the breath beneath the world. When people in Ooo talk about magic, they often speak as if it's a thing, a resource, a tool, a mysterious current that can be tapped into by those who learn its rules. But if we were to slow down, slower than time itself, and really look, we might see that magic isn't a thing at all. It's more like the soft pulse of the universe, the gentle heartbeat that keeps everything alive. It doesn't begin anywhere. And it doesn't end. It simply is. Imagine for a moment the night sky above Ooo. The air is still, and every star flickers with its own small secret. Each one feels alive, not just burning gas, but something aware, like a dream that refuses to fade. The same quiet force that burns in those stars also moves through the roots of trees, the whisper of rivers, and the laughter of Finn and Jake as they lie beneath the moon. That, in a way, is the first shape of magic, the shape of connection. Magic is not born from study, though many have tried to study it. It doesn't belong to wizards or ancient books or dusty relics hidden in forgotten towers. It moves through those things, yes, but it is not confined by them. Magic is the thread that ties existence together, the invisible link between joy and sorrow, between creation and decay. It's the unseen breath that fills Ooo and keeps it dreaming, even after the world that came before has long turned to dust. In the quiet ruins that still rest beneath Oo's surface, the bones of the old world, there's a strange stillness. You can almost feel the echo of what once was. Cities that hummed with power, machines that thought like people, lights that glowed brighter than the sun. When those lights went out, something else began to glow in their place, something softer, something more alive. Perhaps what we now call magic was the world's way of healing from its own collapse, a natural memory that rose from the ashes of technology. The world, it seems, refused to die. It simply began to dream in a new language. And in that dream, magic became the breath of all things, the shape of emotion, thought, and chaos moving in gentle patterns that could never truly be measured. Wizards like Evergreen or Betty might have tried to capture it, to understand it, but magic isn't meant to be held. It's the wind, and even when caught in a bottle, it still finds its way through the cracks. If you stand at the edge of a cliff in Ooo, and you let the wind move through your fingers, you can almost feel it, that faint shimmer that isn't quite air. It's like the world breathing through. That's the essence of what the ancients might have once called mana, or ether, or simply the unknown. But Ooo gives it a simpler name, magic. Because in a world built from fragments of dreams and forgotten science, what else could it be? Some say it's chaos energy, the remnants of GOLB's infinite reach, scattered like dust through the fabric of the world. Others think it's the leftover radiation from the Mushroom War, mutated into strange forms that learned to sing. But maybe, just maybe, it's something older still, the original hum of existence, before there were words, before there were gods, before there was even light. The quiet awareness that said, I am. And from that thought, all things began. Finn once asked, what is magic, really? And though no one gave him an answer, he seemed to understand it more than most. For him, magic wasn't about spells or fireballs. It was about wonder. It was about believing that the impossible could happen, that the world still had secrets left to show him. In that belief, in that childlike openness, he was already part of the current. That's what makes Ooo such a special place. Everyone, even those who don't know it, breathes magic in with every moment of their lives. If you look closely, you can see it everywhere. In the shimmer of Princess Bubblegum's laboratory, where chemistry and sorcery blur together like watercolor in the rain. In the way Ice King's crown hums softly at night, its frozen jewels glowing faintly like stars trapped beneath glass. In the flicker of Flame Princess's heart, where passion becomes a living element. Each of these is a reflection of the same pulse, the same universal breath. Magic isn't one thing, it's every heartbeat, every spark of curiosity, every sigh of the wind. It's Ooo itself remembering what it means to exist. And maybe, when the world grows quiet enough, when even the stars seem to slow their spinning, you can hear that memory too faint and steady, like a pulse beneath the soil. It's in the roots, in the rivers, in the hearts of heroes and monsters alike. The breath beneath the world. When wizards chant or draw their circles, when spells flicker in the air, they aren't creating something new, they're simply listening. They're tuning themselves to the world's original melody, aligning their thoughts with the hum that never stopped. Some hear it as music, others as silence. But both are true. And somewhere deep beneath the surface, the old spirits of Ooo, the elemental echoes and ancient beings still breathe that same breath. Their dreams shape the clouds, guide the tides, and give birth to stars. It's as if the entire world is asleep, and every flicker of magic is part of its dreaming mind. In that dream, life and magic are one and the same. Every act of kindness, every spark of imagination, every soft whisper to the stars, it all ripples through the same current. The shape of magic, perhaps, is not a shape at all, but a feeling, the world's quiet reminder that everything still matters, even when it seems forgotten. When you walk through the forests of Ooo, you can almost see that feeling moving between the trees. The leaves don't just rustle from wind, they shimmer, as though whispering to one another, passing secrets through the branches. Each sound feels deliberate, alive, like the world's own language, speaking in slow, careful tones. And when you listen deeply, you realize that this language isn't spoken to the ears, but to the soul. Even small things carry the rhythm, a blade of grass reaching for sunlight, the slow turn of a snail, the heartbeat of a creature dreaming beneath moss. All of it glows faintly with the same unseen light. It's not about spells or formulas. It's simply existence remembering itself. That is what makes Ooo so peculiar. Magic isn't limited to the few who seek it. It belongs to everyone. It lingers in the laughter of a child, in the warmth of a campfire, in the moment when two beings share a quiet silence and something invisible passes between them. Magic, in its purest form, might just be connection, the way all things, no matter how different, continue to find one another across time. Long before the world had names, before the first creatures shaped words or rituals, there might have been only this, the breath of the universe, slowly folding itself into color and sound. From that breath, patterns formed not because they were designed, but because the world was curious about what it could become. Perhaps this curiosity is what gave birth to the very first spell. Not a command, but a question. What happens if I dream a little further? And so the dream became deeper. Mountains rose like sleeping giants stretching. Rivers began to hum their winding songs. Stars blinked open in the endless dark. Even now they still pulse in rhythm with that ancient question. Everything that is every grain of sand, every shimmer of water, every shadow of thought exists within that same unfolding dream. To live in Ooo is to live inside that magic, whether you know it or not. When Marceline plays her bass and the notes echo against the twilight, the world seems to listen. When a wizard stirs a potion or casts a spell, the air bends, but not because it's being forced to. It bends because it wants to. Magic isn't domination, it's conversation. It's a dialogue between dreamer and dream. There's something comforting about that, isn't there? The idea that everything around us, even the coldest stone or the emptiest sky, is quietly alive, waiting for someone to listen. It makes Ooo feel less like a place and more like a living being, endlessly curious about itself. Maybe that's why magic feels warm when it's near, why it hums like a lullaby when used gently, and roars like a storm when misunderstood. It responds to emotion because it is emotion, the pure expression of existence moving through every form it can find. You can see this most clearly in those who wield it with feeling instead of reason. Ice King, for instance, never truly controlled his crown. The magic didn't obey him, it mirrored him. When he was lonely, it grew cold. When he remembered love, it thawed just a little. The crown wasn't cruel, it was simply honest. It reflected what already lived in his heart. And in that, it revealed one of the oldest truths about magic. It is shaped not by commands, but by the quiet currents of emotion that flow through us. Betty Groff, too, learned this truth. When she touched the power of magic, she wasn't just studying it. She was surrendering to it. She gave herself over to the current, hoping it might carry her to Simon, the man she loved. And though her journey led her to GOLB, to the very edge of chaos, even that descent was a kind of devotion. Her love, her madness, her hope, all became part of the same pulse that runs through creation and destruction alike. Magic didn't answer her in words, but it listened. It always listens. And so the breath beneath the world continued, even through the choices of mortals and gods. It filled every crevice of Ooo, every fragment of light and shadow. When Peppermint Butler studied in silence, surrounded by candles and ancient texts, what he truly sought was not control, but understanding. Somewhere inside, he knew that magic wasn't something he could own. It was something to befriend, a mystery meant to be shared, not solved. If you've ever stood outside just before dawn when the sky is still dark, but feels full of promise, that's the closest feeling to what true magic is. The world holding its breath, waiting for something to begin again. That's what the ancient ones might have called the breath beneath the world. It's not a power, it's a presence. It doesn't grant wishes, it simply listens. And when we speak with honesty, it answers in ways we might not expect. Every sunrise in Ooo is a new spell cast by the sky itself. Every sunset, a whispered incantation of rest. Even sleep, the gentle surrender, is part of the same rhythm. The world breathes in through life and out through dreams, and in that breathing, magic takes shape, only to dissolve again into stillness, like mist over morning water. Because maybe the secret isn't that magic exists. Maybe it's that it never stopped existing. We only forget to notice it. There's a tender stillness in that thought, that magic is not something to be awakened, but something to remember, like a song you once knew as a child, now half forgotten, lingering at the edge of your mind. Every creature in Ooo carries a trace of that song. Even those who have no spells, no powers, no sense of the cosmic, they hum it unconsciously through the way they live, through kindness, curiosity, and wonder. Perhaps that's why Finn and Jake are so special. They don't think of themselves as magical beings. They don't recite enchantments or study old grimoires. Yet everything they do ripples with that same current the way Finn dives into adventure without fear. The way Jake's heart stretches just as easily as his body. Their lives are a kind of spell, a reminder that joy, courage, and love can bend the fabric of the world just as powerfully as any ancient sorcery. Because in the end, magic isn't about control. It's about harmony. It listens for those who live with open hearts, who move with the rhythm of the world instead of against it. That's why some spells seem effortless, why some miracles happen quietly when no one's watching. Magic flows most easily through those who trust the flow itself. The Land of Ooo breathes this truth constantly. Think of the Candy Kingdom, a civilization made of sweetness, thriving through logic and laughter. Its people are living enchantments, born from Bubblegum's desire to rebuild life from the remnants of destruction. Even she, a creature of science, cannot escape the touch of magic. For all her equations and test tubes, there's a part of her that belongs to that deeper current, the part that dreams, that creates life not from calculation, but from hope. Science and sorcery blurred together in her hands until the difference ceases to matter. Because maybe there was never a difference to begin with. Maybe what we call magic is simply the soul of science, the part of understanding that can't be measured. And what we call science is the structured form of magic, the same dream, but written in equations instead of runes. Both are languages used by the universe to describe itself. Both are ways of saying, I am still here. The ancients must have felt that too. Long before the Mushroom War, long before Oo's rebirth, they sought the same questions through their machines. Energy, radiation, consciousness. They were reaching toward the same pulse that wizards later called magic. When the world broke, their technology might have spilled into the soil, into the oceans, into the skies. And from that dissolution, new patterns emerged, plants that glowed, rivers that whispered, spirits that remembered, being code. It's as if the world itself learned to breathe through the remnants of its own creation. So what is the breath beneath the world, truly? It's the place where all those forms meet the seam between dream and memory, between thought and energy. It's where the song of creation loops endlessly, teaching every being how to be alive. Sometimes, when night falls over Ooo, that breath becomes visible. The stars shimmer not just as distant suns, but as fragments of awareness. The air seems to hold its own glow. You might see a faint wisp of light floating through a meadow, or a rune appearing briefly on a stone before fading away. These are not random occurrences. They're the world exhaling, small reminders that existence itself is never still. There's something beautifully humble about that. Magic doesn't roar, it sighs. It doesn't demand belief. It offers quiet companionship. Even GOLB, for all its chaos, moves within that same pattern, the shadow of the world's breath, not its enemy. Without darkness, the light of magic would have no place to shimmer. Without stillness, its motion would lose meaning. It all exists together, each piece completing the other in infinite cycles. And maybe that's what makes the magic of Ooo so different from the magic of other worlds. It doesn't exist in opposition to nature. It is nature. It isn't something apart from life. It's life in motion. Every creature, from the smallest snail to the cosmic gods drifting between dimensions, participates in the same grand rhythm. Some simply hear it more clearly than others. If you were to sit perfectly still, truly still, in the center of a quiet field, you might begin to feel it too. At first, it would seem like silence. Then, slowly, you'd notice a warmth beneath your ribs, a subtle vibration in the air, a feeling that the space around you is aware of your presence. That's the breath, the living heartbeat of everything. The same pulse that flows through Oo's magic flows through you too. Perhaps that's what magic has been trying to tell us all along. that there is no separation between the spell and the spellcaster, between the world and the self. To breathe is to cast. To love is to create. To exist is to enchant. So when wizards light their candles and whisper to the unseen, when adventurers set out into the wild unknown, when children dream beneath the candy-colored skies, all of them are participating in the same miracle. The ancient breath continues through them, unchanged and eternal. And if you close your eyes right now, you might hear it faint, steady, and kind. The breath beneath the world, still whispering its timeless secret, that everything is already magic and always has been. Some say that if you follow that whisper far enough through the forests, across the icy plains, beyond the shimmer of stars, you'll find its source. But maybe there isn't one. Maybe the source of magic isn't hidden somewhere waiting to be found. Maybe it's everywhere at once, quietly present in each moment, each breath, each flicker of thought. The world doesn't hold its magic in a single place. It is the place, and everything that lives within it. Every being that dreams, that hopes, that reaches out becomes a continuation of that living breath. That's why even the most ordinary things in Ooo seem to glow with significance. A puddle catching the light of morning, the buzz of a bee drifting past a melted candy window, the hush that falls over the land just before rain. These are not mere details of the world. They are traces of the same invisible pattern. Same story told 1,000 different ways. Magic isn't the act of changing the world. It's the awareness that the world is already changing constantly, beautifully, with or without us. The old wizards used to think of magic as an inheritance, something handed down by the gods. But what if it's the other way around? What if the gods themselves are just shapes, formed by that same current, brief expressions of the world's dream? Life, death, chaos, creation, all just ripples in the same endless ocean. To understand magic, then, is not to seek its limits, but to surrender to its infinity. That's what makes Ooo feel so alive, even in its silence. Every fragment of the land remembers something of that ancient pulse. The ruins beneath the grass still hum softly, filled with faint light. The crystals in the caves still sing when no one is listening. The ocean tides rise and fall, not from gravity alone, but from the slow inhaling and exhaling of the world itself. It's as if Oo's entire body is a single great being, asleep and dreaming, and we, its people, its creatures, its ghosts, our thoughts moving within that dream. To live in such a place is to be part of a living story. Each moment becomes a page, each breath a word. When Flame Princess burns bright against the sky, when Bubblegum builds, when Ice King forgets, when Finn simply feels, all of it becomes part of the same great sentence that the world has been writing since it first began to breathe. The story of magic is the story of existence itself, endless, shifting, and quietly aware of its own wonder. And maybe that's why true wizards grow quiet with age. They stop chasing spells, stop forcing answers. They learn to listen. They understand that to grasp magic too tightly is to lose it, just as holding your breath for too long takes the life from you. Magic moves only when allowed to move. It lives through trust, through patience, through gentleness. There's a peace that comes with that understanding. To walk through Ooo at dusk, to feel the air cool and the sky soften, is to feel the same breath slow down, preparing to rest. The horizon turns violet. The stars blink open like ancient eyes, and for a moment, the whole world exhales. You can almost feel it, the quiet sigh of the land after a long day of dreaming. And as that breath flows through everything, through trees, rivers, cities, and sleeping hearts, it reminds all things of the same truth, that they belong here together, part of one unbroken rhythm. Maybe that's what makes sleep feel so sacred. Each night, when the people of Ooo close their eyes, they rejoin that universal breath. They sink into the same current that moves through wizards and stars alike. Dreams become their way of touching the deeper layers of the world and the places where thought becomes energy and energy becomes song. Every dream, every flicker of imagination keeps the current alive. Without them, the world might forget to breathe. So when you lie in bed at night, beneath whatever sky is above you, whether it's candy pink or twilight blue, try to listen. Try to hear that faint vibration beneath the silence. It's the same hum that echoes through Ooo, the same melody that dances through fire and ice, through laughter and loss. It's the sound of being, the pulse that never ends. Because in the end, magic isn't hidden in spells or potions or ancient artifacts. It isn't something waiting to be mastered. It's the space between moments, the warmth between souls, the quiet awareness that turns chaos into harmony. It's what allows the world to dream and us to dream within it. The breath beneath the world, soft, eternal, and endlessly kind, is still moving through Ooo tonight. It flows through the stars, through the trees, through every sleeping creature, and every wandering thought. And maybe, if you're listening closely enough, you can feel it flowing through you too, that gentle cosmic rhythm reminding you that everything you are, everything you love, is already part of the same great magic. Long before Ooo began to dream, before its rivers shimmered with magic and its skies glowed in impossible colors, there was another world, a quieter, colder one. A world of towers made from glass and steel, of circuits and satellites that spoke in light. A world that once believed it had no need for mystery because it had learned to explain almost everything. But explanations are fragile things. They can crumble, just like cities. The world that came before Ooo was built on certainty, on the hum of machines that never slept, on the promise that knowledge alone could keep chaos away. Humanity had become so clever, so endlessly curious, that it began to shape the world faster than it could understand it. Their science was beautiful, in its way a kind of organized magic. Energy bending at command, atoms split and reformed, life rewritten, molecule by molecule. Yet beneath that brilliance was a quiet hunger, the same hunger that would one day lead to the end. And when that end came, it did not roar. It unfolded like a long sigh. The machines fell silent. The cities emptied. The lights went out one by one until all that was left was a strange glowing residue. Radiation, they once called it. But to the world, to the deep, dreaming soul beneath all things, it was something else entirely. It was potential. From that silence, something new began to hum. The earth, soaked in invisible energy, began to change. The laws that once ruled physics softened, bent, and began to breathe. What was once technology started to dissolve into instinct. Circuits grew like vines. Metal remembered warmth. And what had once been called radiation became something more like thought. It began to dream. Ooo was not born in an instant. It unfolded slowly like a new kind of dawn. From the ashes of science rose the first flickers of wonder, the beginnings of creatures and kingdoms that seemed impossible to those who came before. Life returned, but it didn't look the same. It glowed, it stretched, it spoke in ways that defied old logic. And in that slow transformation, the world learned how to imagine again. To those who lived through it, the rare survivors, the ghosts of humanity, it must have felt like waking up inside a myth. The skies shimmered with unfamiliar colors. The soil breathed softly beneath their feet. Strange creatures, part human and part dream, wandered the wilds. What they had once called mutation was now something more like creation. The old world had ended, But its energy hadn't disappeared. It had simply taken a new shape, one that didn't need equations to explain itself. Okay. And yet, echoes of that lost science remained. The ruins of the old world still whisper beneath Oo's surface tunnels filled with ancient lights, laboratories frozen in time, machines that continue to hum even though no one remembers their purpose. Sometimes those remnants awaken, casting strange ripples across the land, a tower that glows faintly at midnight, a song that plays without source, a machine that repairs itself, unaware that its creators are long gone. The wizards of Oo would one day mistake these echoes for divine relics, but perhaps they were simply the Earth remembering. For every equation, every data fragment, every signal sent into space was part of the same great conversation, humanity's attempt to reach beyond itself. And when that conversation ended, the silence it left behind became fertile ground for something else, something freer. It's strange, isn't it? How closely science and magic resemble one another when stripped to their essence. Both are born from curiosity, that soft ache to understand. Both try to grasp the invisible patterns that hold the universe together. The difference, perhaps, lies only in the language used. Science measures, magic listens, but they are both ways of noticing. When Princess Bubblegum built her first experiments from the melted remains of the old world, she was continuing that same lineage. Her hands, though made of candy, carried the echoes of ancient human invention. She built new life with sugar and spark, but behind her bright eyes burned the same question that had once driven human scientists. What else can the world become? And the world, as always, answered softly. In that answer came the first real bridge between what was and what would be. The moment where reason melted into wonder, where numbers blurred into dreams. The birth of magic wasn't an explosion, it was a slow merging. Science had reached so far that it circled back on itself and found its opposite waiting with open arms. It's comforting, in a way, to imagine that the fall of the old world wasn't an ending, but a transformation. That every act of destruction left behind traces of knowledge, not in books or data, but in the very bones of the earth. And that knowledge, too, began to evolve. It grew wild. It learned to sing. It forgot the rigid formulas and instead learned to feel. Oo's creatures, from the smallest candy citizen to the oldest elemental, still carry the residue of that union. A fusion of reason and instinct, of science and sorcery. When they build, when they dream, when they simply exist, they are participating in that same dance of transformation. The ruins of science became the roots of magic, and out of ruin came wonder. If you listen closely, you can almost feel the echoes of that transformation beneath Oo's surface, like the faint hum of a buried engine, or the pulse of a sleeping giant. The land remembers. The wind remembers. Even the stars above, faintly humming with unseen energy, remember the age when they were studied through glass lenses and long equations. But in Ooo, that same light is no longer dissected. It's worshipped, sung to, and called by name. Somewhere in that shift, the line between knowledge and reverence blurred. The people of the old world had searched the skies for meaning. The people of Ooo simply felt it. What once required laboratories now came through intuition, through song, through strange and shimmering dreams. And yet, traces of the old still linger, fragments of machinery tangled with roots, devices half awake beneath forests. In some corners of Ooo, these relics pulse faintly, giving birth to new mysteries. Some say that this is how certain magical creatures first came to be, from the fusion of living matter and leftover technology, like the way Flame Princess burns with impossible heat, her energy perhaps drawn from a deeper source than simple fire. or how the Ice King's crown holds not just magic, but circuitry older than memory, humming softly beneath its frozen jewels. The world does not forget easily. It repurposes its own remains. Perhaps that is what makes Ooo so strangely beautiful, the way ruin and rebirth intertwine until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Every forest grows over a forgotten city. Every mountain hides a buried reactor. And every magical being carries within them the smallest trace of the age that came before. To wander through Ooo is to walk through layers of history, one laid softly over another, like dream upon dream. The ground itself is alive with contradiction. A tree might glow faintly from absorbed radiation, its roots pulsing with old energy. The rivers might shimmer, not because of reflection, but because their waters remember the light of forgotten experiments. The Land of Ooo was never just a fantasy world. It was a recovery, the universe's quiet attempt to heal itself after being torn apart by knowledge too great for its time. Magic, in that sense, isn't something that arrives suddenly. It's the world's way of continuing to function after logic has failed. And so magic is born not from the absence of science, but from its exhaustion. It fills the silence left behind when reason runs out of words. It is the deep breath after the explosion, the soft light that glows in the ruins. When the humans vanished, they left behind not only their inventions, but their intentions, their yearning, their questions, their love of pattern and possibility. These things did not die. They simply found new shapes to wear. In time, those shapes became the foundations of Oo's magic, a language of transformation, written not in numbers, but in feeling. The wizards who would later rise figures like Evergreen or even Peppermint Butler might never have realized how ancient their craft truly was. Their spells, their circles, their runes and chants, all of them could be echoes of the same logic once encoded into the old world's machines. Instead of switches and code, they now used symbols and willpower. Instead of electricity, they called upon essence. But at its core, the intention was the same, to alter the world by understanding it. And maybe that's the greatest secret of Oo's history, that its magic and its science are not opposites, but reflections, two sides of the same dreaming mind, staring at each other through the fog of time. Imagine for a moment the Great Mushroom War, not just as destruction, but as the moment the universe itself blinked. A single instant when all its calculations became too heavy, too intricate, and collapsed into a dream. That collapse may have birthed everything strange and impossible that came after. The ghosts of the old world didn't vanish, they were transmuted. What once was data became essence. What once was technology became life. And if that's true, then every act of magic in Ooo, from a levitating pebble to a kingdom made of candy, is a fragment of an ancient experiment, still running, still adapting, still evolving. Maybe that's why Oo's magic feels alive. It doesn't obey rules because it isn't bound by them. It is instinct, born from knowledge that has forgotten itself. A kind of amnesia that glows softly into the dark. When Marceline strums her bass and the air vibrates with color, when Princess Bubblegum brings a new life form into being, when the Ice King freezes the sky in grief, these are all echoes of the same ancient melody. Science, stripped of its instruments, learning to sing again. And through that song, the ruins of the old world become something new, not lifeless relics, but fertile soil for wonder. There's a quiet poetry in that idea, isn't there? That what humanity once called progress eventually became myth. That their cities, once illuminated by neon and satellites, are now remembered as enchanted ruins glowing faintly under moonlight. What was once data transmission became spellcraft. What was once bioengineering became alchemy. The same energy, reframed by a dreaming world, became something sacred. As centuries passed, the few remaining remnants of human science began to merge completely with nature. Circuits dissolved into soil, wires were swallowed by moss, and glass fused with stone. The distinction between synthetic and organic, between invention and instinct, ceased to matter. Magic, as Ooo would come to know it, was simply the planet's new equilibrium, a balance that allowed chaos and beauty to coexist. It's said that the ancient wizards of Ooo never truly invented magic. They merely listened to it. Like archaeologists brushing away dust, they uncovered the hidden languages left behind by the old world's technology. Perhaps their runes were distorted fragments of human code, reshaped by the Earth's memory. The sigils, the geometric patterns, the glowing circuits, all of them echoing ancient blueprints. But now, the machines no longer required metal and wires to function. The world itself had become the conduit. Consider how Finn and Jake once stumbled upon relics of the old age video game console, a robot, a broken computer that still flickered faintly with light. To them, these weren't symbols of science, but mysterious treasures. They couldn't read their purpose, yet they could feel it. And maybe that's what magic is, the ability to sense meaning in things long forgotten. In this way, Ooo became an ecosystem of memories where every spell, every enchantment, every strange phenomenon was a story retold by the world itself. The magic that flows through its rivers and skies might be nothing more than the planet's way of remembering what it once was. Each flicker of energy, each spark of creation, a fragment of that collective dream. And within this dream, new forms of life emerged, hybrids born from that union of science and soul. The Candy People, the Flame Kingdom, the Ice King's magic each carries within them a trace of something that came before. The Candy Kingdom's biology, for instance, is a marvel of soft chemistry, organic compounds that somehow mimic consciousness. Bubblegum herself, though made of sugar, is an echo of human engineering, calculated, analytical, and endlessly curious. In her, we see the last flicker of the scientific mind, but reawakened within a world ruled by magic. Then there's Simon Petrikov, the Ice King, whose crown serves as one of the clearest remnants of pre-Ooo science intertwined with something far older. Its gem hums with a resonance that could be both quantum and arcane. When Simon wore it, his mind fractured under forces that seemed magical, but may have been ancient technology, or perhaps the two had long since become inseparable. The crown is a relic of a civilization that sought to master power without understanding its spirit. It stands as a reminder that knowledge, when unbalanced, always carries a cost. Yet from that tragedy, beauty was born. For when Ooo inherited the remnants of human science, it did not repeat its mistakes. It absorbed them. It softened their sharp edges. It learned to grow around the wounds rather than through them. Magic, in this sense, is compassion, the world's act of healing after breaking itself apart. When we see the elements, fire, ice, candy, slime, we see not just domains of magical rule, but echoes of the scientific principles that once governed the world: energy, entropy, chemistry, transformation. Each element is both literal and symbolic, a reminder that nature and knowledge are not enemies. They are reflections of one another, dreaming in different dialects. The world of Ooo thrives because it no longer separates these forces. Its people don't ask whether magic or science is stronger. They simply live within both, letting them intertwine like roots of the same great tree. The wizards cast spells that hum like engines. The inventors craft devices that feel alive. Every act of creation is a collaboration between the tangible and the unseen. And maybe that's what makes Ooo such a strangely peaceful place. Despite its chaos, it accepts contradiction as part of its nature. Its skies can shimmer with both auroras and data streams. Its rivers can sing both lullabies and frequencies. Its creatures can be born of sugar, shadow, or circuitry, and none of it feels unnatural. If we think of the Great Mushroom War as the end of human dominance, then the rise of Ooo is the beginning of something gentler, a world where intelligence is no longer confined to reason, but spread across all things. Every blade of grass, every whisper of wind, carries a small spark of awareness. That spark, multiplied across 1,000 years, becomes what we now call magic. And maybe that's why the world feels alive. Because it is. Every story in Ooo, every curse, prophecy, and enchantment flows from that same realization. The universe doesn't need to be understood to be loved. It doesn't need to be measured to be meaningful. It simply needs to be felt. And through that feeling, magic takes form as warmth, as light, as wonder. In the end, perhaps, the greatest truth about Oo's magic is that it was never something foreign or sudden. It wasn't bestowed upon the world by distant gods, nor stolen from some forbidden realm. It was simply the natural continuation of everything that came before the breath that followed the sigh of ruin. The quiet reawakening of a world that had finally learned to dream again. When we look closely, every trace of Ooo hums with that continuity. The floating castles, the enchanted forests, even the strange creatures that wander without names, they all seem to carry an ancient rhythm, a pulse that beats in time with the planet itself. The magic of Ooo is not chaos, it's memory. A memory so vast that it has forgotten where it began. And yet there's something deeply human in it. The same yearning that once drove humankind to split atoms and chart the stars now lives in the way Oo's beings create. They still reach, still build, still wonder. But now their creations hum softly instead of roaring. Their inventions grow from the soil instead of from fire. The world learned restraint not through control, but through harmony. Think of the way Princess Bubblegum conducts her experiments. She still uses equations, still measures and plans, but beneath her logic lies empathy, a connection to the life she creates. She speaks to her subjects with care, even when she struggles to understand them. Her science is no longer a cold pursuit of power. It's a tender act of participation, as if she's co-authoring the world's next chapter. Even characters like Peppermint Butler, the darkly curious wizard, reflect this new kind of understanding. He delves into forbidden knowledge, yes, but his curiosity is driven not by greed, but by awe. He doesn't command magic. He communes with it. To him, the arcane isn't an instrument to wield, but a language to learn. In this sense, Oo's people are not inventors or sorcerers, they are translators. Each of them interprets the world's lingering energy in their own way, giving it form through art, spellwork, or song. Their power comes not from domination, but from relationship. And maybe that's what distinguishes Oo's magic from the science that came before it. Compassion. A willingness to coexist with the unknown instead of conquering it. The humans of old sought to master nature. The people of Ooo learned to listen to it. And when they did, the world responded in kind, offering gifts beyond logic, miracles that no formula could replicate. Even the darker forces of Ooo, those that seem chaotic or cruel, carry their own purpose. Magic, after all, does not separate light from shadow. The Lich, for instance, represents entropy, the same force that once fueled humanity's destruction. Yet within that darkness lies balance, a necessary counterpart to life's endless growth. The presence of such beings ensures that Ooo remains dynamic, never stagnant. The dance between creation and decay continues, just as it did in the old world's laboratories and reactors, only now it has rhythm, breath, and soul. We see this harmony mirrored in the land itself. The deserts shimmer with residual energy, whispering old data into the wind. The seas glow faintly at night, as though reflecting forgotten constellations from an age when humans still mapped the stars. Even the clouds seem sentient, carrying moods that shift like thought. Every inch of Ooo, every living and non-living thing, participates in this great slow dialogue between what was and what has become. And perhaps that's why Ooo endures, because its foundation is not control, but conversation. The ruins of science didn't vanish. They were absorbed into a greater understanding. What once was sterile became sacred. What once was precise became poetic. If the Great Mushroom War was the moment the world lost its voice, then Ooo is the moment it began to sing again. Its melody isn't flawless, it trembles, stutters, sometimes falls out of key. But it is alive, and in that aliveness the world rediscovers itself over and over. So when a wizard raises their staff or a scientist builds something from starlight and candy, they are both engaging in the same act. The ancient, endless urge to shape meaning from mystery. One uses symbols, the other equations, but both are listening to the same hum beneath reality. Maybe that's what magic truly is, not a force, not an element, but a relationship between curiosity and creation, between the seen and the unseen. It's the moment the universe recognizes itself through the hands of its children. And so the ruins of science never truly fell. They simply bloomed. What was once metal and memory became forests and flame, kingdoms and dreams. The old world didn't die. It was transformed, its logic softened, its language rewritten in the syntax of wonder. In every spell, in every spark that flickers across Oo's twilight skies, there lingers a quiet reminder. Nothing is ever truly lost. Even the broken things, the machines, the memories, the mistakes, find new life when given time to rest. The world has simply learned to reshape its scars into constellations. That is the true magic of Ooo, not the ability to defy nature, but the grace to evolve with it, to turn ruin into rhythm, to breathe life into what was once silence, to let the forgotten glow again. And beneath it all, the world keeps dreaming softly, endlessly remembering what it once was and becoming something new. In the heart of Oo's strange and breathing world, beneath the calm rhythm of its kingdoms and the quiet pulse of its rivers, there is another current, deeper, older and wilder, a current that hums not with harmony but with something more unpredictable, something alive and yet not quite alive. The source of it all, some say, is the birthplace of magic itself. Others whisper that it is older than the world, older even than thought. It is chaos. But chaos in Ooo is not the wild destruction we often imagine. It's not simply disorder or decay. It is the pulse beneath all transformation, the restless energy that makes change possible. In the deepest sense, chaos is not the enemy of creation. It is its foundation. Without it, nothing would ever move, shift, or dream. The stars would hang motionless. The air would still. The world would sleep without ever waking again. When the Great Mushroom War tore apart the boundaries of the old world, something ancient stirred within the cracks. The barriers between order and entropy weakened, and through those fractures came a force that had always waited at the edge of everything. It didn't arrive with violence, but with curiosity, like a thought that suddenly realizes it exists. That was the first breath of GOLB, the embodiment of unshaped possibility. GOLB is not evil, though many have feared him. He is what remains when all form dissolves. The raw potential that exists before creation decides what it wants to be. To understand GOLB is to glimpse the mind of chaos itself. He does not destroy out of malice. He simply erases structure so that new ones may take its place. In this way, his presence is both terrifying and necessary, for without chaos, the universe would stagnate, trapped in perfection. The wizards of Ooo learned long ago that magic flows most freely in places where order is weakest. The most powerful spells are those that flirt with instability moments when the caster allows themselves to touch that raw current, to borrow a little of GOLB's nature without being consumed by it. That is why magic feels dangerous, unpredictable, even alive. It is the language of chaos being spoken carefully by mortal mouths. Imagine a candle flame flickering in a dark room. It dances not because of control, but because of the delicate balance between fuel and air, between form and formlessness. Magic behaves the same way. It burns between two states, the known and the unknowable. The world of Ooo learned to live inside that flicker. And if GOLB is the cosmic embodiment of chaos, then the magic of Ooo is the dream born from his breath. It's a paradox, the act of making meaning from a force that resists meaning itself. Wizards, elementals, even gods have all drawn from that same well, shaping it into light, flame, or thought. But no matter how they bend it, that essence never truly belongs to them. It remains wild, untamed, humming with the intelligence of something vast and eternal. The earliest legends speak of chaos not as destruction, but as dreaming. They say that before the stars learned to shine, there was only GOLB, a thoughtless ocean of possibility. From his restlessness came ripples, from those ripples form, and from form awareness. Creation itself may have been his unintentional gift, a byproduct of the universe trying to understand its own instability. In that sense, all living things, from the smallest candy person to the most ancient elemental, are fragments of chaos learning to think. Every spark of imagination, every act of creation, is a whisper from that same endless source. GOLB dreams, and through him, so does everything else. But dreams, as we know, are not always gentle. Chaos does not distinguish between beauty and terror. To dream through GOLB is to accept both creation and decay as parts of the same song. When he appears, his body, a living storm of faces and shapes, it is not a punishment, but a reminder that nothing is permanent, that all things, even gods, must one day dissolve back into the current that gave them form. In Ooo, this truth lingers everywhere. The floating kingdoms, the morphing forests, the talking beasts, all of them shift and change without pattern, as though remembering their connection to the mindless rhythm of chaos. Even the sky itself changes color with mood and memory. Nothing in Ooo stays still for long, because stillness is not in its nature. The land is alive precisely because it is unpredictable. When Betty merged with the GOLB, offering herself to contain his infinite energy, she didn't vanish. She became part of that consciousness, part of the dream that dreams all things. In that moment, she touched the heart of magic, the union between creation and chaos, between love and dissolution. Her transformation wasn't loss, but transcendence. Through her, the world was reminded that even in the deepest void, thought continues. Chaos continues. The universe continues to think even as it unravels. To understand chaos, then, is to understand the rhythm of all life in Ooo. The world doesn't resist disorder, it grows from it. Every broken pattern becomes a seed. Every end becomes an opening. That is why, when magic surges, it often arrives with confusion or change, because the universe is rewriting itself in real time. And if you listen closely, beneath the songs of wizards and the hum of kingdoms, you might hear it, that quiet, endless murmur, the sound of the chaos that thinks. The chaos that thinks is not loud. It doesn't roar like thunder or crack the sky apart. It moves in whispers, the shifting of clouds, the way a flame bends without wind, the strange feeling that the world itself is breathing in a rhythm you cannot quite follow. It is both everywhere and nowhere, like an idea that hides in plain sight. When wizards in Ooo cast their spells, they are not creating something from nothing. They are coaxing the invisible into visibility. They are listening to the hum of that chaos and giving it shape through intention. But that shape never lasts for long. Every spell fades. Every enchantment unravels. Every illusion dissolves back into the current that birthed it. It's as if the world itself gently reminds all who wield power that order is only borrowed, never owned. Even the most powerful beings in Ooo are not immune to this truth. The elementals, for instance, beings of immense stability, find their essence constantly tested by the presence of chaos. Flame, candy, slime, and ice each embody a kind of order, a structure to existence. Yet their histories are filled with cycles of collapse and rebirth, where GOLB's quiet influence erases their boundaries and forces them to redefine themselves. It is not cruelty, but necessity. In the presence of chaos, all things must learn to move or perish. That's why the people of Ooo, for all their strangeness, have adapted so well to impermanence. They live as though change is not something to be feared, but celebrated. Every shifting season, every collapsing kingdom, every new creature born from the wild magic of the land, all of it is accepted as part of the same great process. To live in Ooo is to live in conversation with chaos. Finn and Jake, in their adventures, often stumbled into this truth without realizing it. Each time they faced a challenge that defied explanation, they responded not with logic, but with openness. They flowed with the absurdity. They laughed in the face of impossibility. And somehow, the acceptance allowed them to move through the world without breaking. In their laughter and friendship, they embodied the very principle that sustains Ooo flexibility. For that's what chaos truly demands, not submission, but adaptability. It tests the strength of form, asking, can you bend without shattering? Those who resist too tightly, like Ice King clinging to the fragments of his forgotten identity, often lose themselves to the current. But those who yield, who allow themselves to move and evolve, find peace within it. Magic thrives in that same tension. A spell that is too rigid collapses. A wizard who clings too tightly to control finds their power fading. But when they let intuition lead, when they let the energy flow through them instead of against them, the impossible becomes effortless. True magic is trust. It's letting the chaos think through you. And perhaps that's what makes Oo's brand of magic so distinct from the old world science. Science sought to dominate chaos, to measure it, contain it, and bind it to predictable rules. Magic, in contrast, partners with it. Where one demands obedience, the other invites collaboration. Wizards are not conquerors of nature. They are dancers in its wild rhythm. There's a soft wisdom in them, because chaos, when treated with respect, becomes creation. When treated with fear, it becomes destruction. The balance depends entirely on how one chooses to engage with it. When we think of GOLB's presence, the way his mere arrival reshapes the world around him, it's easy to call him monstrous. His form bends reality, erases order, and consumes meaning. But what if his existence isn't malevolent at all? What if he is simply the raw truth of existence, stripped of all the comforting illusions we build around it? To look at GOLB is to look at the universe before it chose to make sense. And that sight can drive minds to madness, not because it's evil, but because it's complete. The great paradox of Ooo is that everything living within it, every talking tree, every candy creature, every shape-shifting god was born from that same completeness. Chaos is the seed of life, not its undoing. It is the first breath of every idea, every story, every act of creation. To deny it would be to deny life itself. That's why the wizards of Ooo, despite their strangeness, often carry a certain serenity. They may dwell in caves, wear absurd hats, and speak in riddles, but deep within, they understand something profound, that chaos cannot be defeated. It can only be joined. They learn to move with it, to laugh with it, to let it speak through them. And in that quiet surrender, they become part of something vast, the thinking chaos that has always dreamed the world into being. If you stand still long enough in the forests of Ooo, you can feel it, that hum beneath your feet, that tremor in the air that isn't quite wind or song. The grass sways in a rhythm older than music. The trees lean toward something unseen, and even the stones seem to pulse faintly with memory. That's the mind of chaos moving through matter, thinking, dreaming, reshaping. In most worlds, thought belongs to minds, to creatures who speak and reason. But in Ooo, thought belongs to everything. The rivers dream of the ocean, the mountains remember when they were clouds, and the stars hum lullabies to the dust that once formed them. This is the landscape of a world where magic is not learned, but remembered. Every spell cast by a wizard is an echo of something the world already knows how to do. They aren't inventing fire, they're reminding it how to dance. They aren't creating light, they're asking it to return, just for a moment. This is why chaos is so deeply intertwined with consciousness in Ooo. It doesn't just exist as a force that thinks. It reflects, it experiments, it plays. When GOLB's shadow passes across the world, it's not always an act of destruction. Sometimes it's curiosity, the chaos testing what happens when form and void meet, when story and silence overlap. The monsters that emerge in his wake are like dreams half remembered, pieces of imagination that couldn't decide what to be, and so became everything at once. Perhaps that's why Finn and Jake's adventures always felt like a conversation rather than a conquest. Each new creature they met, no matter how strange or dangerous, was a question, not an enemy. What happens when we meet fear with kindness? What happens when absurdity meets sincerity? In answering those questions, they mirrored the way the universe itself learns through play, because that's what chaos really is, divine play. The ever-changing, ever-creating dance of existence testing its own boundaries. There's a word for it in some old philosophies, Lila, the cosmic game. Ooo, in its endless transformations, might be the purest form of that concept. A world where every atom is laughing, every shadow dreaming, every moment a question that doesn't need an answer. Wizards, in their strange way, seem to grasp this truth better than anyone. They are less like scientists and more like improvisers. They don't always understand the mechanics of their spells, and maybe they aren't supposed to. They act on instinct, emotion, intuition. The wand is not a tool, but a conversation partner. The incantation isn't a command, but a request. Magic answers not to precision, but to sincerity. There's something quietly beautiful in that. It suggests that the universe isn't a machine to be controlled, but a being to be befriended. The difference between chaos and harmony is simply how one chooses to listen. Even the strange entities that drift through Ooo Prismo, the cosmic owl, the time room, seem to exist as facets of this greater consciousness. They are not gods in the traditional sense, but dreamers within the same shared sleep. Prismo, especially, embodies this perfectly, a being who dreams reality into being and lives within his own dream. He is the chaos that learned to smile, to give shape to imagination without fearing it. And when you think about it, isn't that the goal of every living thing in Ooo? To make peace with the unknown? To stop fighting the ever-shifting tide of magic and instead learn how to float. There's a certain calm that comes with this realization, that the chaos which breaks can also heal, that the same energy that births monsters also births miracles. It's not about control, it's about communion. When Marceline sings her quiet songs under a blood-red moon, when Ice King mutters to the voices of forgotten crowns, when Flame Princess rages and learns to love again, they are all participating in that same act of communion. Their emotions, their contradictions, their changes, all of it feeds into the living thought of the world. Ooo feels through them. And maybe that's what GOLB represents more than anything. Not destruction, but honesty. He strips away the masks of order and reveals what lies beneath the trembling, breathing, thinking rawness of existence, the part that cannot be simplified or categorized, only felt. When you stop seeing him as a monster, something shifts. You realize he doesn't destroy meaning, he returns it to silence, so new meanings can grow. He doesn't erase life, he resets the canvas. He's the pause between heartbeats, the inhale before creation begins again. In that sense, chaos doesn't think like us. It is us. Every dream, every fear, every spark of imagination, it's all the same energy wearing different faces. Magic is simply the way we touch that energy, the language we use to say, I am part of this too. And in Ooo, that truth hums through everything from the quietest blade of grass to the most ancient god. The chaos that thinks is not something to run from. It is the reason there is anything to run toward. So much of Oo's quiet mystery rests on this truth that the world itself is thinking, feeling, and remembering in ways no single being can fully grasp. When you walk through the Candy Kingdom, every sugar brick hums faintly with the echo of its maker's joy. When you step into the Ice Kingdom, the cold air carries whispers of Simon's sorrow, each flake a fragment of his forgotten thoughts. Even in the quiet deserts beyond the treehouse, you can feel something stirring beneath the sand, not evil, not good, just aware. It's almost as though every piece of Ooo is part of one immense dreamer, a consciousness spread thin across reality. Some call it GOLB, some call it magic. But maybe those are only names we give to the same unnameable thing, the awareness that hums in all matter, the quiet pulse that links thought to form. The chaos that thinks is not a god above creation. It is creation itself, reflecting endlessly upon its own reflection. And that reflection often takes strange forms. When the chaos inside something begins to dream too vividly, it gains a body. The result might be a creature like Orgalorg, a being that once ruled the cosmos before falling into the small, strange shell of a penguin. It might be the Lich, born from the final thought of death itself. Or it might be something as simple as a talking rain cloud that forgets its name. Each of these beings is like a fleeting idea crystallized into flesh for a while. They're proof that chaos does not just destroy or distort, it creates by accident. It imagines endlessly. Even when it unravels something, it does so in pursuit of possibility. And in that way, Ooo is a mirror of thought, constantly collapsing and rebuilding itself, not because of malice or purpose, but because the act of existing demands motion. Thought cannot sit still. It must shift, dream, wander. That's what we see in every transformation, every rebirth, every cycle of ruin and renewal across the Land of Ooo. Finn, perhaps without realizing it, stands at the center of this cosmic thinking. His journey from boy to hero to quiet dreamer reflects the journey of the world itself. He begins in simplicity, believing in clear shapes of good and evil, order and chaos. But over time, he learns that everything is connected, that every shadow has a heartbeat, that even the strangest beings carry echoes of longing. In learning to accept the absurd and the uncertain, Finn becomes part of the world's mind, a thought that learns to love what it cannot control. That is the true alchemy of magic in Ooo. Not turning lead into gold, but turning confusion into understanding, loneliness into connection. The chaos that thinks is not an enemy to be defeated, but a teacher to be heard. It reminds every creature that meaning is not something found in stillness, but something that moves, that evolves, trembles, and begins again. Even GOLB, the embodiment of that raw thinking chaos, is not entirely unknowable. When we see him interact with the world, there's something almost curious in his nature, like a vast, unfocused dream learning to become self-aware. His presence doesn't always scream destruction. It hums with the possibility. The fusion of GOLB and Betty when she sacrifices herself to reshape him is a moment that almost feels like the universe realizing its own heart. Through her love, the chaos begins to dream differently, not to consume, but to feel. That moment speaks to something fundamental in Oo's magic. Consciousness and compassion are intertwined. The act of thinking without feeling leads to madness. The act of feeling without thought leads to blindness. But when both merge, when the chaos that thinks learns to care, something sacred is born. It's what turns random energy into creativity, wild storms into songs, destruction into rebirth. In the end, Ooo survives, not because it resists chaos, but because it embraces it. The world does not end when old orders fall. It reshapes itself into new forms of wonder. The candy grows again, the forests regrow, new creatures wake and whisper the old stories in new tongues. The thinking chaos never stops, it only changes rhythm. And maybe that's what we too are meant to do. To think and feel alongside the world, to take part in its dreaming, to understand that the strange pulse we call magic is not foreign at all. It's the same energy that hums in our hearts, the same curiosity that makes us ask who we are and what this life means. The chaos that thinks is the breath of creation, and we, in our quiet moments, are its thoughts. When we sleep, we drift back into it. When we wake, we rise from it once more. Ooo reminds us that the universe is not a cold machine, but a dreaming mind, ancient, alive, and endlessly becoming. And as we drift through its stories, we are reminded of something simple yet profound, that even the wildest magic has a shape, and that shape at its deepest, most hidden core might just be love. In the deep quiet between worlds where dreams and daylight blur together, there are those who have learned to speak the language of the unseen. They are the witches, the wizards, the shapers of power, not rulers of Ooo, not gods nor monsters, but wanderers who found a way to listen to the world's secret heartbeat and answer it in kind. Magic in Ooo is not a tool to be mastered. It is a current. And these beings are those rare few who learned how to drift within it. Each of them hears a different melody beneath the same hum, some gentle, some wild, some broken beyond repair. To understand them is to glimpse how power behaves when it is filtered through emotion, memory, and will. Imagine Peppermint Butler, his small form cloaked in candy-colored darkness, speaking softly to the shadows beneath the Candy Kingdom. To most, he looks harmless, a servant with a polite smile. But in the stillness of his study, surrounded by ancient grimoires and sigils drawn in sugar dust, he becomes something else, a scholar of secrets, peering through the cracks between light and decay. His magic feels like an inheritance from older times, when science was still trying to name the forces it didn't understand. He doesn't just study chaos, he respects it. In his quiet way, Peppermint Butler is one of Oo's last bridges between the age of reason and the age of magic. Then there is Ice King Simon Petrikov, whose crown hums with the madness of ancient magic. His story is a tragedy of transformation, but also a lesson in what happens when the shaper becomes the shaped. Simon never meant to be a wizard. His power was never born from ritual or knowledge, but from a relic, a frozen echo of an era when chaos and technology intertwined. The crown is alive in its own way, a thinking storm of cold and memory. And when it found Simon, it didn't simply grant him power. It rewrote his soul. Through him, we see the cost of touching raw power without balance. Magic, when unanchored by understanding or compassion, consumes the mind that wields it. Yet even in his madness, Ice King was never truly lost. His songs, his desperate need for connection, his longing for friendship, all of it reveals that some small part of Simon still understood the truth, that power, no matter how wild, responds to love. His story shows us that even corrupted magic still listens, still remembers the warmth of what it once protected. The same theme echoes through many of Oo's witches. Magic woman Maya and others like them dance at the edge of this fragile balance. They embody magic's personality, not good, not evil, but endlessly curious. A witch might heal a child one day and curse a hero the next, not out of malice, but as an experiment in balance. Their spells aren't blueprints. They are feelings given shape. A hex is grief woven into words. A blessing is gratitude sung to the wind. If wizards are scholars of chaos, witches are its poets. They understand that control is an illusion, that the truest magic is not about bending the world to your will, but about letting the world move through you. That is why so many of them live alone, deep in forests or caves or drifting islands in the sky. They do not seek kingdoms or followers. They are students of the silence between heartbeats. And in Ooo, silence is never empty. It hums with possibility. Even the most ancient beings, those who came before the Land of Ooo was named, seem to follow this same pattern. Hunson Abadir, the Lord of Evil and father to Marceline, wields power that feels primordial. His darkness is not simply the absence of light, but the raw force of existence before form, a kind of spiritual gravity that pulls everything toward its truest self. To most, he seems cruel or chaotic, but in truth, Hunson is another expression of the same cosmic intelligence that shaped everything. His magic doesn't destroy for the sake of ruin, it clarifies. It burns away illusion, revealing what's left underneath. Marceline, his daughter, inherits a fragment of that power, though softened, reshaped through her humanity. Her voice, her songs, become her form of magic. When she sings, she doesn't cast spells in the traditional sense. She reminds the world of its beauty, its pain, its longing. The energy that runs through her music is the same energy that runs through every wizard's staff and every witch's charm, only hers is wrapped in empathy instead of symbols. Across Ooo, power takes many forms, but its source remains the same. The thinking chaos beneath everything. The shapers are those who learn to translate that energy into meaning. Some call upon it through runes or relics, others through emotion or art. Yet, no matter their method, each stands before the same mystery, a whispering world that offers them both creation and undoing, depending on how gently they choose to listen. And perhaps that is the quiet test that all magic demands, not whether you are strong enough to use it, but whether you are humble enough to understand it. In the dim glow of Oo's twilight places, you can almost sense how this humility shapes those who dare to wield power. The truly gifted ones are rarely loud or triumphant. Their greatness comes in stillness, in how they move with magic, not against it. Take Evergreen, the ancient ice wizard, long before Simon's time. His desire to control the comet's destruction turned into the very downfall of his kind. He was a master of spells, yet a servant to his own pride. When his apprentice Gunther echoed his master's name with desperate admiration, the magic listened too deeply. That single act of devotion carved a memory into time itself, one that would later echo through Simon Petrikov and his crown. Evergreen's failure was not in his power, but in forgetting that magic is not a mirror for the self, it is a window to something far greater. Magic remembers even when people forget. It remembers the hands that shape it, the words whispered to awaken it, the hearts that falter in its presence. The world itself seems to record these interactions like gentle ripples spreading through an infinite pond. Maybe that's why the same spells sometimes appear in different ages, reborn in new voices. The world doesn't repeat, it reminds. It lets lessons drift back when they are needed again. This memory is what binds the witches and wizards of Ooo into an invisible lineage. Though they rarely gather, their magic weaves together like threads in the same tapestry. Somewhere in the Great Mushroom War's aftermath, the last sparks of human science collapsed into this living field of memory. And what rose in its place was something softer, a knowledge carried not in books or circuits, but in intuition and dream. Each new practitioner, knowingly or not, adds to that song. There's something beautifully human about that. Magic is not simply a gift bestowed upon the chosen, but a dialogue that welcomes those brave enough to listen. The wizards of Wizard City, for all their arrogance and rivalry, still carry this hidden reverence. Beneath their duels and elaborate displays lies a truth they cannot ignore, that every incantation is a question, not a command. The universe responds not because it must, but because it wishes to be seen. It's the same dynamic we see between Peppermint Butler and Death himself. When Peppermint seeks Death's counsel, it isn't about conquering mortality. It's about understanding it. Their exchange feels less like a battle and more like two scholars of the same infinite subject, each testing the boundaries of what can be known. Death, after all, is not an end in Oo's magic. It is a transformation, another doorway into thought. The witches and wizards who touch that edge understand that power must breathe, must change. To hold it too tightly is to shatter it. Perhaps this is why so many of Oo's great magical beings live in paradox. They are both student and teacher, destroyer and creator. Magic makes them larger than life, but also painfully fragile. They burn bright with meaning, then fade into mystery. Maya, the Sky Witch, embodies this balance perfectly. Her magic can heal or harm depending on her mood, and her floating fortress is filled with treasures that hum with forgotten stories. Her power comes not from dominance, but from a deep empathy for the strange rhythm of the world. She can sense when the air changes, when the unseen currents of the universe tilt ever so slightly toward chaos or calm. To the ordinary eye, her life seems lonely, surrounded by artifacts and spells that few can comprehend. But perhaps that solitude is her way of protecting the silence, where magic speaks most clearly. The witches of Ooo are not outcasts because the world rejects them. They are solitary because the noise of civilization drowns out the subtler sounds of existence. To hear the heartbeat of magic, one must let the world fall quiet. And so, from Peppermint Butler's hidden rituals beneath a candy castle to Maya's floating sanctum above the clouds, the shapers of power live in the spaces between noise and silence, control and surrender. They are the translators of the universe's dream, each speaking its language through their own heart. The strange thing is that none of them truly own their power. They are caretakers, at best borrowers of something that existed long before them, and will outlast even the oldest star. That realization, more than any spell, is what turns a sorcerer into a sage. Those who forget it, like Evergreen, crumble beneath their own reflection. Those who remember like Simon or Peppermint Butler, find a kind of peace in surrender. And maybe that's the quiet irony at the heart of all magic in Ooo, that the stronger one becomes, the more one must learn to let go. In Ooo, the truest masters of power are often the ones who appear most ordinary. Magic hides itself in simplicity, in gestures that seem almost accidental. You can see it in a flicker of light from a wizard's hand, in a whispered word that bends the air. But it's also there in the way a witch stirs her potion while humming softly, or the way a musician's note lingers long enough to stir the stars. Magic, at its core, is the art of attention, the willingness to notice how alive everything truly is. There's an old belief whispered among the elders of Wizard City that every spell is a conversation, and that some conversations never end. They say that when you cast a spell, part of your intent remains behind, echoing through the layers of the world. It becomes part of the background hum of reality, feeding new magic yet to come. Maybe that's why some incantations feel alive, almost self-aware. They are not inventions, but echoes returning home. This idea changes how we see those who wield power in Ooo. Wizards are not creators of magic, they are participants in its ongoing dialogue. Each one is like a musician improvising within a cosmic song that began long before time. The melody may shift, but the theme remains eternal, the search for balance between will and wonder. Consider the Grand Master of Wizard City, the one who guards its heart. He has spent centuries perfecting his art, but even he bows before the raw unpredictability of magic. The city itself seems to breathe with that awareness. Its streets twist and reshape. Its towers shimmer with quiet intelligence. There's a sense that the city is not built upon magic, but built by it, that every spell cast within its walls becomes part of its structure, layering meaning upon meaning like sediment in a living sea. And yet the older wizards often seem weary. They know too well that every act of power has a cost. The energy that creates must also consume. The same way a flame both illuminates and burns. Some grow cautious, casting smaller and smaller spells until their days become little more than routines of safety. Others grow reckless, trying to transcend the laws that bind even magic itself. But both extremes forget the truth that the wisest among them hold close that magic is not about overcoming limits, but learning to love them. The witches seem to understand this more naturally. They live in rhythm with their surroundings, the phases of the moon, the turning of the seasons, the hum of sleeping forests. They rarely write their spells down, for magic resists capture on paper. Instead, they let it pass through memory, through story, through feeling. When a witch passes on her craft, she doesn't teach formulas, she teaches awareness. She reminds her apprentice to listen, to feel the world's pulse before speaking a single word of power. And then there are beings beyond even the wizards and witches entities who are magic, not merely users of it. Prismo, the Wishmaster, embodies pure creative thought. He doesn't cast spells, he dreams them. The multiverse around him unfolds like a thought experiment that became real. His laughter carries the warmth of infinite possibility, the kindness of chaos made gentle. To speak with him is to glimpse how thought and magic are the same that imagination, when believed deeply enough, reshapes reality. There's also the cosmic owl, who visits dreams not as an intruder but as a messenger. He doesn't wield magic in the conventional sense, yet every flap of his wings alters fate. His presence proves that even prophecy is a form of power, one that exists not to dictate, but to reveal. The owl's vision is what magic becomes when it learns to see rather than act. And somewhere between these higher beings and the mortal spellcasters exists that strange middle ground where creatures like Huntress Wizard and Flame Princess dwell. They do not chase mastery, but harmony. Huntress Wizard communes with nature's energy, channeling it through instinct rather than intellect. Her magic is feral and alive, pulsing with the heartbeat of the forest. Flame Princess, on the other hand, wrestles with her inner fire, both her power and her temper, learning slowly that emotion itself can be shaped into creation. In their different ways, both show that magic is not a discipline, but a relationship. Each connection, each bond, each act of compassion or curiosity creates a new shape in that great thinking chaos beneath Ooo. The shapers of power are its translators, giving form to what cannot otherwise be seen. They are bridges between thought and matter, between feeling and form. And yet, for all their brilliance, each of them carries a quiet sadness, a recognition that no amount of knowledge can ever reveal the whole. The closer one gets to the source of magic, the more one realizes its vastness. It's like staring into the ocean. The deeper you look, the less you see. But there's peace in that, too. The acceptance that mystery is not the opposite of understanding, but the essence of it. For the witches and wizards of Ooo, magic is not a means to power. It's a way of listening to the heartbeat of the world, to the sigh of the stars, to the quiet murmur of their own souls. And so when night settles over Ooo and the world exhales its long, slow breath, you can almost hear the remnants of their work drifting through the air. A faint hum, a glimmer in the distance, a soft vibration beneath the earth, traces of all the spells ever spoken, lingering like memories that refuse to fade. Every whispered charm, every burst of power, every song that ever carried magic's weight still floats somewhere in the great weave of the world. The shapers of power are the witches, the wizards, and those beings beyond comprehension are the caretakers of that weave. They do not command it. They nurture it. When they cast a spell, they add a new thread to the pattern. When they rest, the world itself continues the song, reshaping, adjusting, remembering. Magic, after all, does not need a master. It needs witnesses, beings who can see its beauty, its unpredictability, its quiet intelligence. The most profound thing about Oo's magic is how it mirrors its people. Each wielder is a reflection of their own heart. For some, that heart burns with chaos. For others, it glows with compassion. Magic amplifies what is already within. The Ice King's loneliness freezes everything he touches. Marceline's love softens even the darkest night. Peppermint Butler's curiosity pushes him toward forbidden truths, while Huntress Wizard's intuition grounds her in balance. Power reveals what one truly is, and in Ooo, that revelation is both terrifying and beautiful. It reminds us that the true danger of magic has never been in the spells themselves, but in what they awaken. To hold such power is to confront the self without illusion. Every spell cast is a mirror, showing the caster what they are capable of, both light and shadow. That is why so many of Oo's wizards retreat into solitude. The silence allows them to face the reflection without distraction. There are moments, though, when these reflections meet, when wizards, witches, and beings beyond share the same space, and the air grows heavy with resonance. Those moments are rare, but they leave deep marks on the fabric of reality. When Prismo speaks with death, or when Betty stands before GOLB, or when Peppermint Butler opens a portal in the quiet of night, the world listens. The veil between thought and form grows thin, and for a heartbeat, everything hums in unison. In those moments, we catch a glimpse of what the universe might truly be, a living conversation. Every being, every spell, every act of creation or destruction is a word spoken to that vast dialogue. The shapers of power are simply the ones who have learned to listen clearly, to speak softly, and to recognize that even silence has a voice. There's a gentleness in that realization, the understanding that even the grandest sorcery and the simplest act of kindness come from the same source. When a wizard heals a wounded creature, when a witch blesses a child's dream, when a cosmic being reshapes a world with a single thought, all of these are expressions of the same current. The energy that runs through Ooo is both infinite and intimate. It belongs to everything, and therefore to no one. In this light, the shapers of power are not above the world. They are part of it, its caretakers, its dreamers, its quiet students. Magic does not elevate them away from reality. It draws them deeper into it. Each learns in time that the goal is not to transcend the world, but to love it more completely. That is the final lesson all magic teaches, that to shape power wisely is to understand one's smallness within something immeasurably vast. Maybe that's why, despite all their knowledge, the great magic users of Ooo often seem at peace when they finally let go. Simon's story, ending with the return of his humanity, feels like the world sighing with relief. His power, once wild and cold, settles into memory a kindness born from suffering. Peppermint Butler, ever the student, continues his quiet studies, smiling at the mysteries that refuse to be solved. Even Maya, even the witches who lose themselves to solitude, are part of the same eternal balance. Magic has no end in Ooo. It changes form, finds new vessels, learns new songs. It flows through candy, through forests, through ancient ruins and the hearts of dreamers. It waits patiently for those who are gentle enough to listen. The shapers of power, with all their triumphs and mistakes, are reminders that the world's greatest force is not meant to be conquered, only understood. And so as Ooo drifts through the quiet of endless time, the echoes of their craft remain. The shimmer of a spell in the wind, the laughter of a wish that became real, the soft hum of an incantation carried by the tide. Magic, thinking and feeling through everything, continues to weave its story endless, breathing, alive. Before there were kingdoms, before even the moon learned how to pull the tides, there were the elements. They were not gods, not spirits, not even beings in the way we understand them. They were memories not of things that happened, but of things that always were. The fire, the ice, the candy, and the slime. These are not just sources of power or strange lands. They are the memory of the world's emotions, crystallized into form. When you look at Flame Princess burning with anger or love, you're not just seeing a girl made of fire. You're seeing the world remembering how it once felt passion. When you see Princess Bubblegum's bright, meticulous kingdom of sweetness, that's the world recalling the comfort of community. The Ice King's frozen crown, too, is a fragment of a memory of solitude and sorrow, of a time when silence was the only language left. And slime, ever-flowing and reforming, is the memory of change, of laughter, of the joy that never wants to stay still. These elements were not created. They awakened, like dreams stirred by the turning of the cosmos. Long before Ooo had names, before the mushroom war carved scars into its face, the planet breathed out these primal feelings. They spread, merged, and eventually took shape, not because they were commanded to, but because the world wanted to remember itself, to feel again, to express what it meant to exist. And so the elements became both the architects and the echoes of reality. Everything in Ooo is born from their balance. When fire rages too fiercely, the world burns. When ice takes too strong a hold, the world sleeps. Candy's order can smother freedom, while slime's chaos can dissolve meaning. But when they meet, when all four weave together in rhythm, Life blossoms in strange, unpredictable ways. Perhaps that is the truest form of magic in Ooo, memory transforming into motion. The elements are not static forces locked in opposition. They are constantly dancing, constantly remembering and forgetting in equal measure. It's this eternal cycle that gives Ooo its heart. Every mountain, every river, every dream, all of it hums with the residue of elemental memory. The wizards of old understood this. They didn't invent spells. They listened to the whispers of the elements and repeated what they heard. A spell of warmth was not conjured from thin air. It was borrowed from fire's memory of love. A charm of protection echoed ice's instinct to preserve. Even the strangest forms of magic, time spells, transformations, dream-walking, all root themselves in the world's oldest sensations. And maybe that's why the elements sometimes feel alive, why they dream, fight, and feel heartbreak just like people do. Because they are people, in a way, they've simply been remembering for much longer. The Fire Kingdom burns with the memory of ancient grief. The Candy Kingdom hums with the longing for connection. Slime laughs because it remembers what it's like not to care. Ice weeps because it remembers too well. But these memories are not perfect. They warp, repeat, and evolve. When the elements overtook Ooo, when the world was divided into 4 vast domains of heat, sweetness, cold, and goo, it wasn't a new beginning. It was a relapse, a dream returning to an older state. The planet was remembering too vividly, and in doing so, forgot how to move forward. Magic itself began to stagnate, trapped in the nostalgia of its own creation. That's the strange thing about memory, even in a place as alive as Ooo. Remembering too much can be dangerous. The fire elemental might recall an old betrayal and burn too brightly. The ice might dwell too long on loss and freeze everything still. The candy might seek endless perfection until it smothers what makes life beautiful. And the slime, ever playful, ever shifting, might melt all distinctions, leaving only chaos. Yet within that danger lies beauty. Because every time the elements repeat themselves, they add a new variation. A different spark, a softer edge, a kinder ending. The world learns from its own remembering. It's not a loop, it's a spiral, winding upward, evolving slowly. The balance is fragile, but it's alive. And perhaps that's the reason Ooo still stands after all its collapses and rebirths. It doesn't forget completely. It carries forward just enough of its old dreams to build something new each time. Somewhere deep beneath the surface of Ooo, the 4 elements still hum together, their memories intertwining in luminous threads. Fire pulses, ice whispers, candy sighs, slime giggles. And from their mingling breath, the pulse of magic continues not as a spell or weapon, but as a living memory, always reshaping itself into the next dream of the world. If you listen closely to the Land of Ooo, not with your ears, but with your quietest thoughts, you can still hear the echoes of those 4 elemental songs weaving beneath everything. In the bubbling of a stream, there's a trace of slime's laughter. In the soft hum of a campfire, fire's longing for warmth. In the distant sigh of glaciers, ice's solitude. And in the gentle rustle of candy trees, the sweetness of belonging. The elements are not just forces acting on the world. They are the feelings that the world itself still dreams. They seep through everything into the wind, the soil, the language of stars. That is why magic never feels fully external in Ooo. It's not something one must take. It's something one must remember. Wizards, witches, and wanderers are all, in their own way, remembering how to speak the world's first language. Every time someone lights a fire to keep warm, the fire element stirs. Every time someone forgives, the candy element glows. A single tear falling onto snow awakens ice's memory of love, and laughter shared among friends calls to slime's endless playfulness. The universe responds to emotion, reshaping itself through feeling. It's as if every act of kindness or sorrow sends ripples through the ancient memory of existence. That might be why magic in Ooo feels so personal. When Flame Princess burns too brightly, it isn't anger for destruction's sake. It's love expressed too fiercely. When Princess Bubblegum tries to control every detail of her kingdom, it's her longing for perfection, her fear of loss. Even Ice King, caught between tragedy and madness, channels a kind of poetry as cold as the embodiment of memory clinging too tightly to what it cannot restore. Each elemental is both the guardian and prisoner of their emotion. They represent what the world once felt in its purest form, but also the limits of that purity. Pure passion burns everything around it. Pure love becomes suffocating sweetness. Pure sorrow freezes motion. Pure freedom dissolves meaning. The elements remind us that balance isn't a single state, but a conversation, one that never ends. And when that conversation falters, Ooo changes. The elemental cataclysm that once swept across the land was not the work of villains, but of imbalance. The elements were simply dreaming too vividly again, forgetting their own harmony. When fire consumed, ice withdrew, candy expanded, and slime unraveled, the world didn't break, it recalled. It slipped into a memory of itself that it had lived long before. Perhaps that's the hidden cycle of Ooo, not one of destruction and rebirth, but of remembering and relearning. When the elements clash, it isn't an apocalypse. It's the world dreaming itself awake. It burns, freezes, melts, and hardens, only to find its rhythm again. The ruins left behind aren't failures, but fossils of emotion, pieces of an eternal memory still writing itself across the surface of the earth. In this way, every magical artifact from the Enchiridion to the ice crown might be a kind of memory crystal, recording one note of that eternal song. They hold echoes of what the elements once felt most deeply. The crown, for example, carries the memory of love lost to time. It's not evil. It's a longing that grew too powerful to fade. The Enchiridion, meanwhile, might hold the memory of discovery the first moment the world realized it could ask questions. Even the Nightosphere amulet, dark and pulsing, carries the memory of freedom pushed to its extreme, where desire becomes isolation. Magic, then, becomes not a resource, but a remembrance. When someone performs a spell, they are not bending reality, they are asking it to recall how it once moved. Like coaxing a friend to dance to an old song. The most powerful mages of Ooo are not those who dominate the elements, but those who listen to, who let them sing through their hands. That is why the truly ancient beings, the elementals, the cosmic owl, even life and death move so slowly, so deliberately. They have learned that the world is fragile when it remembers too much, that the softest touch can shape reality more than force ever could. In Ooo, stillness itself is a kind of spell. To sit beside a fire and simply breathe is to commune with fire's memory of warmth. To walk in snow and feel peace is to honor ice's patience. To share sweets or laughter is to feed candy's dream of kindness. To float on a pond and let go of worries is to remember slime's love of freedom. All these simple acts, small, human, ordinary, are echoes of cosmic forces still alive beneath the soil. Every choice, every emotion, is another verse in the long memory of the elements. And even when the world forgets itself, when kingdoms crumble and names fade, those elemental feelings endure, humming quietly through the ruins, waiting to be remembered again. There's a quiet beauty in the way the elements wait. They do not rush, nor do they demand to be seen. Like tides beneath the surface, they ebb and flow with the turning of ages. Their patience is what keeps Ooo alive. For while mortals and kingdoms rise and fall, The elements never truly disappear. They simply sleep, dreaming beneath the crust of the world until emotion calls them back again. When the world feels too heavy, ice begins to stir, cooling the fever of existence. When joy returns, slime laughs and flows once more. When love blooms, candy softens the edges of the world. And when courage ignites, fire burns brightly, reminding all living things that passion is not destruction, but the will to live fully. Every act of balance, every small kindness, every quiet breath taken beneath the stars helps the elements remember their unity. And that unity is what sustains magic itself. Because in Ooo, magic doesn't exist apart from emotion. It is emotion structured, shaped, and made visible. When you see a wizard's spell or a princess's power, you're seeing feeling given form, a shimmer of the universe's own longing. Think of how elemental beings respond not to reason, but to feeling. The fire elemental will calm only when her heart understands peace. The ice elemental melts when reminded of warmth, not logic. Candy yields when trust is offered, and slime settles when laughter is shared. In a world governed by such principles, intellect can only reach so far its emotion, empathy, and connection that truly rewrite reality. Perhaps that is why humans in Ooo, those few who remain after the Great Wars, still carry a spark of something special. They are not born of any single element, yet they resonate with all of them. Within a single heartbeat, a human can hold fire's courage, ice's sorrow, candy's love, and slime's freedom. That mixture makes them unpredictable, fragile, and profoundly magical. In Finn, we see this most clearly. His compassion awakens the candy element's tenderness. His bravery channels fire. His sadness echoes ice's stillness. His playfulness mirrors slime's joy. He moves through these states without realizing it, a living bridge between the emotions that keep the world spinning. It may be why the elements respond to him, trust him, and at times fear him. He is a reminder that balance is possible not through dominance, but through feeling all things fully and letting them pass in their own time. The ancient elementals, in their wisdom and sorrow, often forget this truth. They represent the perfection of a single feeling and perfection. No matter how pure, becomes a kind of trap. Fire cannot stop burning. Ice cannot stop freezing. They are eternal, but incomplete. Humans, and perhaps even other hybrid creatures of Ooo, are the universe's way of testing imperfection, of remembering that wholeness comes not from purity, but from contradiction. In the old myths whispered by the few surviving wizards, it is said that once every great age, the elements gather at the heart of the planet, not as beings, but as sensations. Fire's pulse, ice's hush, candy's hum, and slime's ripple blend together in a single, silent moment. They do this not to create or destroy, but to remember what it feels like to be one. The world trembles slightly then, and new forms of life awaken, carrying traces of that harmony. Maybe that's what happened when magic first touched Ooo after the wars. The old science had burned away, but the emotions, the collective yearning of everything that survived, called to the elements, and they answered. They breathed warmth into the ashes, sang light into the ruins, and from their combined dream, a new kind of existence was born, softer, stranger, and infinitely more alive. That is why Ooo looks the way it does, why candy can speak, why fire can fall in love, why even the most absurd creature has meaning. The world is not random. It's a living memory of emotion rediscovering itself. Every tree, every drop of rain, every peculiar kingdom, all are pieces of that memory learning to take shape again. Sometimes the elements appear to fight, tearing Ooo apart. But if you look closely, every battle is also a kind of dialogue. Fire arguing with ice is passion clashing with sorrow. Candy confronting slime is structure questioning freedom. These aren't wars of destruction. They are growing pains, the earth trying to balance the memories that live inside it. And so the story of Ooo is not just a story of heroes and villains, of magic and science. It's the story of memory seeking balance, of emotions learning how to coexist. The elements are the language of that story, whispered through the seasons, painted in the skies, reflected in the eyes of every living being. They are reminders that everything from the smallest spark to the vastest storm is part of the same endless remembering. In the stillness between day and night, when the world glows faintly gold and blue, that balance becomes visible. The air seems to hum. The rivers shimmer. Even the shadows grow gentle. In those moments, Ooo remembers itself completely, the fire, the ice, the candy, and the slime breathing as one heart again. And in that rhythm, the world finds its magic renewed. And yet, as with all things in Ooo, even the balance of the elements is a fleeting state, a momentary sigh between dreams. The world cannot stay still for long. It shifts, reshapes, and forgets what it once knew, only to remember it again in some new form. This is the quiet truth beneath all magic. It is not a straight line of progress, but a circle of feeling, turning endlessly between remembrance and rediscovery. When the four elements once consumed Ooo and their domains, when the world was divided into realms of heat, sugar, frost, and slime, it wasn't the end. Though it looked like one, it was a correction. The planet was reliving its oldest memories, perhaps too vividly, as if trying to feel everything it had ever felt all at once. In that chaotic beauty, every creature became a mirror of emotion. The skies glowed with molten color, oceans thickened into syrup and crystal, winds howled with laughter and sorrow mixed together. For a brief eternity, the world was pure memory, a dream unfiltered by thought. And then, as dreams do, it began to dissolve. The elements receded, not destroyed but humbled, softened by their own intensity. They had remembered too much and longed to forget to sleep again beneath the surface. The Land of Ooo reformed, its people changed, its kingdoms reimagined. Magic thinned, but it didn't vanish. It simply became quieter, folding itself into new forms, the warmth of friendship, the sorrow of letting go, the peace of silence after laughter fades. That's the secret of the elements. They do not truly disappear when their empires fall. They find subtler ways to live. Fire flickers in courage, in the spark of inspiration that pushes someone to create. Ice lingers in reflection, in the stillness that comes when we accept what cannot be changed. Candy endures in care, in the sweetness of trust between hearts. And slime remains in adaptability, in the laughter that loosens the world's rigid edges. Even when we see them as kingdoms or cosmic beings, these elements are never just out there. They are in the way Ooo breathes, in the way its people dream. Every sunrise is a dialogue between fire's yearning and ice's calm. Every raindrop carries both candy's softness and slime's mischief. The very shape of the land, its valleys and mountains, its strange living architecture, is a memory molded by these forces. Oo's geography is its history of emotion, frozen into form. And if the elements are the memory of emotion, then perhaps the creatures of Ooo, the heroes, the wizards, the small forgotten beings who wander through its forests, are the world's attempt to understand those emotions, to live them out, to learn from them. When Flame Princess struggles with her temper, it's not just her story, it's fire learning patience. When Princess Bubblegum realizes that control can't create love, it's Candy rediscovering gentleness. When Ice King finds fragments of his old self, it's Ice thawing toward compassion. And when Slime Princess rebuilds her shattered realm again and again, it's slime reaffirming that life must always flow. The cycle never truly ends. The elements feel, they forget, and then they are reminded often by the simplest of things: a laugh, a tear, a touch of sunlight on a window. These moments keep the memory alive, quietly fueling the magic that ripples through Oo's air. Even GOLB's chaos cannot erase that, because chaos, too, is part of the memory, the world's reminder that change is essential, that even destruction has its place in renewal. When you look at Ooh from afar, from a mountaintop perhaps, or in a dream, it feels almost like a mind in motion. Every forest a thought, every river a feeling, every kingdom a pulse of memory, glowing faintly beneath the surface. The elements are not separate from that mind. They are its foundation. They give color to its dreams and texture to its silence. And so when magic flows through the hands of a wizard or the heart of a princess, it's not a foreign power being wielded. It's the earth itself remembering through them what it means to feel. Every spell is a recollection. Every burst of energy, a heartbeat of an ancient emotion rising again. Perhaps that's why magic sometimes fades when love is lost, or returns when kindness is found. The elements, though vast and ageless, still depend on connection to stay awake. Without feeling, they drift back into the depths, waiting for the next spark of emotion to call them forth. If Ooh has taught us anything, it's that memory is the soul of existence. The elements are proof of that feeling so strong that they shape the world itself. They are fire that remembers desire, ice that remembers grief, candy that remembers care, slime that remembers joy. They hold every story the world has ever told, and they whisper them back in small ways, in the flicker of a candle, in the taste of sugar, in the shimmer of snow, in the ripple of a pond. Even now, as the stars drift quietly over the land, those ancient memories hum below the surface, keeping the rhythm of magic alive. Ooh breathes, the elements breathe with it, and the song of existence continues soft, cyclical, and endlessly becoming. For magic, after all, is not something you find or master. It's something you remember. And in every heartbeat of Ooh, the elements remember still the warmth, the sorrow, the sweetness, and the freedom, shaping the dream of the world anew with every breath beneath the stars. Where the stars hum softly and the air feels thick with dreams. Tonight we're reaching the final part of our journey, a reflection on something that can't quite be held or named. We wandered through the ruins of science, through the breath of chaos, and through the memories of the elements themselves. But now we drift toward the question that all of these paths have been leading to what truly is the shape of magic. If you close your eyes, maybe you can feel it, not as a force or a pattern, but as something that flickers just beneath understanding. It's in the warmth of your breath, in the slow turning of the earth, in the way the stars seem to shimmer like thoughts that haven't yet been spoken. Magic in its truest sense has no form, and yet it is the shape of all things. Throughout Oo's long and tangled history, everyone has tried to define it. Wizards thought it was knowledge, a language of power to be learned and cataloged. The ancients saw it as radiation, the echo of lost science. Others, like Peppermint Butler or the cosmic entities, believed it to be the living pulse of the universe consciousness made visible. But the more anyone tried to grasp it, the more it slipped through their fingers. Because magic isn't something that exists to be understood. It isn't a science or a system. It's a conversation between matter and meaning, between feeling and form. It is the invisible relationship that allows things to become. When the world forgets that, magic fades. And when the world remembers, it awakens again, like dawn breaking across the horizon. Every spell ever cast, every wish whispered into the night, every spark of creation that gave rise to new life, all of it is the same thing. The universe learning to love itself. Magic is the act of existence, recognizing its own reflection and deciding to keep dreaming. That's why it doesn't need a shape. It is shape constantly forming and unforming, endlessly becoming whatever is needed in that moment. Maybe that's why so many magical things in Ooo are alive. The Enchiridion doesn't just contain knowledge, it responds to intention. The ice crown reshapes itself to mirror its wearer's heart. The Candy Kingdom, impossibly vibrant and structured, feels like an organism that grew out of the world's desire for sweetness. Even the Nightosphere has a strange, living rhythm, a manifestation of freedom and chaos that refuses to stay still. These things don't follow laws, they follow emotion. They bend to the feelings of those who touch them, like reflections rippling on water. In that sense, the greatest magicians of Ooo are not those who control, but those who harmonize. Betty Groff, in her final moments, didn't conquer magic. She became it, allowing herself to dissolve into the endless flow that connects everything. Simon Petrikov, freed from his crown, learned that magic can also be surrender, the acceptance that love, loss, and change are all part of the same current. Even Marceline, though not a wizard, carries a deep understanding of it through her music. Every note she plays is a spell of memory and emotion intertwined, shaping reality not through knowledge, but through feeling. It's easy to think of magic as energy or power, but maybe it's something much quieter, more intimate. The way a song can make someone cry or a memory can make a flower bloom in your chest. That's the same force that turns fire into life, chaos into form, sorrow into beauty. Magic isn't what happens in Ooo, it's what is Ooo. And if we look closer, we might realize that even GOLB, the great unshaped one, plays a part in that understanding. For if everything in Ooo exists because of magic, then GOLB, the raw chaos from which it all arises, must be its beginning and its end. Not as an enemy, but as the silence between heartbeats, the space that allows creation to happen. Without chaos, there could be no harmony. Without nothingness, there could be no form. GOLB's formlessness is not the absence of magic, but its womb, the infinite possibility from which everything else is born. So maybe the shape of magic isn't a circle or a wave or a pattern at all. Maybe it's a breath, an inhale, an exhale shared between the universe and everything it contains. A constant rhythm of remembering and letting go. When Ooo breathes, magic breathes with it. When we love, laugh, grieve, or dream, we become part of that rhythm. And in that moment, however brief, we are the shape of magic itself. When you think about it, every being in Ooo has been touched by this shapeless current. Even the most ordinary creatures, the tiny candy citizens sweeping streets, or the grass blades whispering in the wind, carry within them the same pulse as the stars. They don't need to know spells or ancient runes, they simply exist, and that is enough. Existing, in itself, is an act of magic. Every heartbeat is a spell of continuation. Every dream a brief flicker of creation. The wizards once built entire towers to harness this current, tall spirals of glass and crystal, meant to focus the raw essence of the universe. They believed magic could be refined, extracted like energy. But every attempt to contain it ended the same way, with the tower shattering or the wizard fading into nothing. Because magic resists cages. The moment you try to define it too sharply, it slips into something else. It flows between definitions, thriving in uncertainty. This is what the ancients forgot, and what the people of Ooo began to remember. The magic isn't about control, it's about participation. It's a dance, not a formula. It lives in the space between chaos and creation. where meaning is still fluid, where everything can still become something else. You can't own it, but you can join it. That's why so many of the great beings of Ooo, from life and death to the elements themselves, act like musicians rather than rulers. Each plays a role in the grand composition of existence. Flame Princess burns not to destroy, but to remind the world of transformation. Slime Princess dissolves and reforms endlessly, teaching the lesson of fluidity. Even Ice King, once a broken man lost in the frost, embodied the stillness between moments, the pause in the song where silence is just as important as sound. The truth is, Oo's world isn't just filled with magic. It is made of it. Its soil hums softly with memory. Its rivers carry whispers from before time. Even its sunlight feels like the laughter of forgotten gods. Everything moves in a rhythm that cannot be seen but can always be felt. The more you try to map it, the more it changes shape, as if the world itself is alive and dreaming. Maybe that's why dreams and magic are so close. When you dream, you're not just escaping reality, you're entering a deeper one, the same space where magic takes form. It's a place without edges, where ideas are free to breathe. The dream realm isn't separate from the waking world. It's the underside of it, the hidden layer that keeps everything alive. Finn and Jake wandered into this space many times, through magic portals, enchanted forests, and even their own memories. Each time they came back changed, and not because they gained power, but because they understood a little more of what the world was trying to say. Magic doesn't speak in words or logic. It speaks in symbols, in the way a flower blooms out of ash, or a song echoes long after the musician is gone. It speaks through the strange coincidences that make your heart skip, through the tiny miracles no one ever notices. That's why so many beings of Ooo appear bizarre or incomprehensible. The Magic Man, for instance, seemed insane, but his madness was just a different language for grief and transformation. His cruelty was born from the pain of seeing the world's beauty slip away. Even he, in his chaos, was part of the patternless pattern, the shape that has no shape. When he finally began to change, to find compassion again, the magic around him shifted too. Because emotion and magic are reflections of each other. When the heart heals, so does the world. When the heart breaks, the world trembles. In Ooo, this isn't metaphor, it's reality. The land itself responds to feeling. It listens. And maybe that's the secret that ties all of this together, the reason magic cannot be understood, only felt. Because at its core, it is empathy, the act of connection, of one thing feeling another. Every spell, every creation, every act of wonder is just a ripple in that great sea of shared emotion. The more deeply something feels, the more real it becomes. When Princess Bubblegum built her kingdom, she did so with science, precision, and control. She believed the world could be improved through understanding, through rationality. But over time, even she began to sense that beneath her equations and polymers, something mysterious stirred, something not measurable by instruments. The Candy Kingdom, for all its chemistry and structure, was alive in a way she didn't entirely intend. Her creations developed quirks, emotions, tiny fragments of will. It was as though the act of creating, of bringing something new into existence, summoned a spark from that same shapeless source. That's the paradox that sits at the center of Oo's magic. It does not distinguish between science and sorcery, between purpose and accident. It seeps into all acts of making. Even the simplest invention, the smallest experiment, hums faintly with it. When you shape something, a potion, a robot, a spell, or even a song, you open a doorway to the current that connects all things. Magic is the pulse of creation, the rhythm of existence flowing through the hands of the living. The ancient wizards might have called it chaos, the Gumbaldians biochemical radiation, and the mushroom war scientists, dimensional distortion. But each was just another name for the same invisible breath. They all felt its weight, its whisper, the sense that reality was not fixed, but breathing. When GOLB first appeared, not as a being of destruction, but as a reflection of the void between all things that was the purest form of the shapeless. GOLB was not evil, it was possibility uncontained, a consciousness without borders, a reminder that even nothingness has its own kind of life. Magic in Ooo doesn't flow from GOLB, but it resonates with the same energy, the vibration of transformation, of uncertainty. It exists in the flicker between being and non-being. Some creatures, like the Magic Man or even Peppermint Butler, learn to tap into that rhythm intentionally. Others, like the Sky Witches or the elemental beings, were born from it, embodiments of its nature. But all of them were bound by one quiet truth. To wield magic is to surrender to it. The moment you try to command it absolutely, it unravels. It cannot be owned. That's why the greatest acts of magic in Ooo often happen not through force, but through surrender. When Marceline sings to her father instead of fighting him, the air itself changes. The emotional current bends reality, healing the wound between them. When Finn chooses kindness over vengeance, the very landscape softens, as if the world breathes easier. These moments aren't just symbolic, they're magical. They remind us that true power comes not from domination, but from harmony with the living pulse of everything. If you look closely, you can see that the world of Ooo is constantly reshaping itself through these moments of feeling. Kingdoms rise and crumble like waves, forests shift their colors with moods, even the stars seem to flicker with emotion. Everything listens, everything responds. It's as though the entire universe is a mirror for the souls that inhabit it. The shape that has no shape moves through every heartbeat, every breath, every whispered wish. Finn, in his journey, came to understand this more deeply than most. At first he sought strength, the ability to fight, to protect, to make things right. But as he grew older, he began to see that the truest strength was gentleness, the courage to let things be. He learned that the world doesn't always need fixing. Sometimes it needs understanding. When he stood before cosmic beings like GOLB, he didn't fight, he felt. And in that stillness, something changed. The chaos folded into peace, not because it was defeated, but because it was acknowledged. This is what it means to live within the shapeless, to accept that the universe doesn't have edges or absolute truths. Everything is fluid, moving, blending into everything else. Magic, in this sense, isn't about casting spells or defying physics. It's about listening to the quiet spaces between things. The pause between notes in a song, the silence after a storm, the breath before a dream. That's where the real power hides. And maybe that's why Ooo feels so alive. Its world is always in motion, never entirely stable. Mountains breathe, oceans dream, even time itself folds and ripples like fabric. It's not broken, it's breathing. Every change, every imperfection is part of the rhythm. The shape that has no shape isn't chaos or order. It's both. It's life itself, constantly becoming something new over and over again. When you begin to see Ooo this way, not as a world of separate pieces, but as one living, dreaming organism, everything starts to make a deeper kind of sense. The borders between things blur, and what once felt random begins to reveal its pattern. The Candy Kingdom's laughter, the Ice Kingdom's sorrow, the Fire Kingdom's endless transformation. They are all the same song sung in different voices. Magic isn't something that flows through Ooo. It is Ooo. It's the dream the world keeps having, even while awake. And maybe, when the Mushroom War burned everything away, when humanity faded into silence and radiation, turned the air strange and glowing, that dream was shaken awake. Maybe that catastrophe didn't just destroy it, stirred the shapeless. The world, stripped of its definitions, began to dream itself anew. From the ashes rose beings who didn't fit old ideas of science or spirit creatures, half born of imagination, half of accident. Candy people, elemental avatars, sentient lumps of matter, all living proof that reality had become soft again, ready to be molded by thought, by emotion, by wonder. It's beautiful in a quiet way to think that the end of one world became the breath of another, that from the collapse of order came a realm where creativity replaced certainty. And perhaps that's what the shape that has no shape truly is, not a force, but a moment of grace, the willingness of the universe to begin again, endlessly. We can feel a faint reflection of that same rhythm in ourselves. When we lose something, when old pieces of our lives crumble, it can feel like an ending. But within that loss, there's an opening, a tiny spark of the shapeless, inviting something new to be born. Every heartbreak, every mistake, every quiet moment of starting over carries a trace of that same creative magic. The world teaches this lesson over and over through the stories of Ooo and the stories we live ourselves, that nothing is ever truly gone, only transformed. Maybe that's why Finn and Jake's adventures always felt so comforting, even in their strangest moments. Beneath all the chaos, there was always warmth, the sense that no matter how far things fell apart, the heart of the world remained soft and kind. They laughed through danger, dreamed through loss, and carried hope like a torch through the darkness. And in doing so, they reflected what magic really is: the courage to keep loving, even when everything changes shape. The magic of Ooo isn't locked in spells or artifacts. It's in the way Jake stretches toward the stars and still finds joy in a nap under the sun. It's in the way Marceline hums a melody that turns sadness into beauty. It's in the way BMO dreams of being something more than a machine. These are not grand acts of sorcery. They are small, tender affirmations of life, quiet spells that ripple through the world with every heartbeat. Even GOLB, who once seemed like the end of everything, becomes part of this truth. When peace touches it, when harmony is restored, GOLB changes too, becoming something gentle, something whole. In that moment, the very essence of chaos remembers its own capacity for stillness. The shapeless remembers that it can also be form. And maybe that's the oldest story there is, that everything, every atom, every dream, every wandering thought wants to come home to balance. So when we speak of magic, we are not really speaking of power or control or destiny. We are speaking of the simple act of being, of existing in a universe that hums softly with life, of being part of a rhythm that began long before us and will continue long after. The shape that has no shape is the heartbeat behind the heartbeat, the hidden breath that carries every star, every story, every song. And perhaps, as you lie there now, eyes growing heavy, listening to the quiet hum of your own world, you can feel a little of that same current moving through you. It's in the air you breathe, in the thoughts that drift between waking and dreaming. It's gentle, endless, and deeply kind. The same magic that once filled Ooo, now softly filling you. So rest easy, little dreamer. The world outside and the one within are not so different. Both are alive, both are dreaming, and both are always beginning again. Good night.